2022 has been a wild year for video games, especially for Nintendo. Pokemon, Kirby, Fire Emblem, Xenoblade, Splatoon, Mario, basically every major IP of theirs received a new installment this year. Sorry Zelda fans. But the one game out of the lot I was most anticipating was... okay, probably Xenoblade 3, but my second most anticipated game was easily Bayonetta 3. While I showed up to the Bayonetta party fashionably late, I fell in love with these first two games instantly. Something about the satisfying combat loop, matched with this entertainingly absurd tone, kept me engaged for hours on end. So, you could say I was looking forward to the third installment. Dude, the months prior to this game's release had me acting like a different person. I was so excited to play, I actually started getting into the freaking lore. My YouTube history was just theory video after theory video. I was this close to busting out the red yarn late at night to try and piece the darn timelines together. It was rough. I even went out of my way to watch the 2013 anime movie, and I fell asleep 10 minutes in. Point is, I was stoked for this game. It'd been 8 years since the last installment, so all fans' expectations were through the roof. And now the game's out. I was up for that midnight release, smashing A like a fool, waiting for Nintendo to give me access to the game, and I beat it fittingly on the spooky, scary night of Halloween. But that one question still remains. Does it meet expectations? Is it the best Bayonetta game? Is it game of the year? Okay, maybe more than one question. So enough dilly-dallying. I mean, this is Bayonetta we're talking about. Let's get right into the action, starting with the... Now, I don't know about you guys, but I always look forward to the title screens of whatever game I'm booting up. I mean, hey, alongside the box art, this is the other half of how a game packages itself. A truly good title screen will captivate you and get you craving that upcoming adventure. Despite their simplicity, I like the first two, and given the slick logo for this game, I was keen to see what Platinum had prepared this time round. Okay guys, bold choice. As for the aesthetic of the actual game itself, I like it a lot. I've gone on record saying that I was never really a fan of Bayonetta 1's PS3/360 era art direction, and thought 2 was a major improvement, though there are plenty of people out there who think the complete opposite. So 3 probably took the best route possible in finding a middle ground between the two. The grittiness is still there, but the world isn't devoid of color either. There's as much variety in the different locales as you could want too, a much needed fix that frankly both the first two games struggled with. Grassy plains, scorching deserts, Mustafar, the color purple, it's all here, man. And the characters' designs all feel right at home in this surprisingly diverse world. Look, I'll be honest with you guys, when I first saw this new design, I wasn't a fan. I remember watching that first trailer, getting stoked about seeing Platinum's name, and then going, oh my gosh, what did they do to her? Well, turns out past me was an idiot, because this design is goated, man. I'm not sure why, but her new look has grown on me a lot, to the point where I'm not sure which is my second favorite. I do still stand by 2's being the best though, come on, nothing beats the pixie cut. All the returning faces get some great redesigns too. Luca's finally dripped out, I love how casual Rodon is now, and Enzo's trucker hat is so in character. The one exception is of course Jean. Look, the coat's cool and all, but what in the world were they thinking with this pink lemonade zigzag nonsense? Come on! All in all though, the characters look good, especially the newly introduced Viola, who gives off so much of this it's not a phase mom energy that is completely sold by her hair, jacket, shirt, everything. As for the enemies, well, they really like green. Look, Bayonetta enemies have always been really bizarre looking. See, that's a that's a Bayonetta 1 looking enemy right there. I remember this one time I was playing Smash Ultimate with a friend on the Clock Tower stage, and this guy showed up, and my buddy was like, dude, what the hell is that? I've beaten this game several times now, and to be honest, I still don't really know. As for the third installment, this is the first game of the series where angels aren't the main enemies, and instead we've got these homunculi. And while they all follow the same toothpaste looking color scheme, they're still able to differentiate themselves. I would see this beefy boy and go, hell yes, combo food! And on the other hand, I'd see this ground tentacle guy and want to delete the game. The point is, their designs are distinct enough for you to recognize each of them respectively and know what to expect. And whether you're giving or receiving the thrashing, you'll be jamming out either way. It's a staple of the Bayonetta games to choose an old 50s era song about the moon and turn it into this insane battle theme. I still remember my socks being blown off when I realized there was a Frank Sinatra cover in the first game. Bayonetta 2 presents one of my favorite favorite vocal themes in gaming with Moon River, and Moonlight Serenade of the Threequel does not disappoint. But I'm not sure what the copyright policy on that is, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it. A song I can play though is You Know It, You Love It, Whispers of the Alfine, sorry. I remember I first heard this track in one of the trailers, and I was like, dude, what is that song? I need it! So for ages, us fans were stuck with the stinky version of the song with all this SFX from the trailer, but you best believe I was still jamming out. So when I actually got to play the game, you know I popped off when I finally got to hear that full version. This is genuinely my new favorite Bayonetta theme, and they knew they struck gold as we hear it as a leitmotif in other tracks as well. This includes none other than Let's Hit the Climax, Time for the Climax. Get to the Climax, sorry. An iconic track that's been remixed in every game, and my favorite thing they do with it is make the intro longer with every version. Yeah, okay, but what if we added another? Okay, but what if we added another? Hey, now that's more like it! But I will be very frank with you guys. These tracks are all blown out of the water by one song in the OST. A song that literally nobody expected to find in a Bayonetta game. While I appreciate to bits how faithful the majority of the OST is here, Viola's battle theme makes it all look so trivial, it's not even funny. Just like her design, Viola's theme expresses her character immaculately and is a total bop as a result. I remember the very first battle of hers that I got into, I heard this song, searched up the track immediately, and rocked out for the rest of the day. Bayonetta 3's OST definitely took more risks to be more musically diverse, and in my opinion, is probably the most consistently great out of the three because of that. I could sit here all day saying, yo guys, listen to this, now listen to this, oh how about this one? But we still got the rest of the game to cover. If you liked what you heard, then I implore you to search up the OST, click on literally any song, and there's like a 90% chance it's a banger. Now so far, I've just been praising the presentation, but I should probably address the elephant in the room. The visuals. I'm a firm believer that art style trumps fidelity every time, and the art direction definitely does a lot of the heavy lifting here, but the lack of polish is still undeniably prevalent. While I still wouldn't say Bayo 3 looks bad, it's certainly a bit underwhelming. I know this game had an extremely troubled development, so I feel kinda awful criticizing the graphics when it's honestly a miracle we're even playing it, but even Bayonetta 2 looked more polished than this. You know, the game from 2014? I know a lot of people were getting worked up over the environment textures, and yeah, those could definitely use some work. But what really rubbed me the wrong way were the facial animations. Like, for the most part they're pretty solid, but then the game does these close-up shots and all the jank is just on full display. I know some will bring up the argument of, well, the Switch isn't that powerful, and that is true. But keep in mind that this system runs Bayonetta 2, Breath of the Wild, Luigi's Mansion 3, and now Nier Automata all pretty well. Even by Switch standards, for a major release, these graphics feel just barely serviceable. I know everyone was throwing a temper tantrum about the frame rate, but I never really had any issues that truly detracted from my enjoyment with this game. A character action game like Bayonetta obviously needs at least decent frame rate given how reaction and input based the gameplay is. And yes, I am expecting to get comments from people complaining about how it's not running at their coveted 7 trillion FPS and the game is thus ruined. But I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Yeah, but you're feeling real goofy for taking out your mortgage to buy that 6-figure PC for only the most optimal Roblox gameplay. Bayonetta 3 remains in this range, and if I was ever doing poorly, I knew it was my fault and never once felt the need to blame any performance issues. For reference, the game runs at a targeted 60 FPS, but often drops into the 50s or even 40s if there's a lot going on, and let's be honest, there is. Yeah, it's a shame, especially going from the first two games whose Switch ports rarely drop below 60, but those games also didn't have kaiju fights on the go. I should also mention the surprisingly ambitious set pieces, which are locked at 30 FPS, and honestly, it's a miracle they even squeeze these into a Switch game. At the end of the day, with the second-to-second combat that needs nothing short of all your attention, most frame drops weren't very noticeable. And I'm thinking that while we're here, we should probably get talking about the If there's anything I can count on this franchise for, it's that oh so addicting Bayonetta gameplay loop. All you fans of the series know exactly what I'm talking about when I say it just doesn't get old. This installment finds itself being more ambitious than ever before, building upon the base gameplay far more than we saw in the transition from the first to the second game. Right off the bat, you're thrown into these surprisingly expansive areas, a stark contrast to the previously linear levels of the first two games. This allows Platinum to litter the world with loads of optional tasks for you to complete. You've got the usual challenges for rewards, the returning broken chest from Bayo 2, these sick time reverting bits, chasing down cats, and a solid amount of extra combat encounters. Thanks to this increase in actual things to do, as well as the infinitely better traversal options like oh my gosh, I felt so much more inclined to actually explore and sink hour after hour into this game. Whenever I play through the first Bayonetta, I usually hit the credits at about 9 to 10 hours in, and the sequel's even shorter, clocking in at just 7. But Bayonetta 3 straight up doubled that playtime at around 14 to 15 hours. There's just so much more to do, and that incentive to keep playing is only strengthened via the combat. Okay, that's like half true, because Bayonetta 3 pulls a bit of a DMC and has you play as 3 different characters throughout the campaign. The first of which is like peak gaming, the second feels like a work in progress, and the third, yeah, we'll get to that later. Let's start things off on a good note with thankfully the majority of the game, the levels of the titular character herself. In my opinion, playing as Cereza in this game is the best it's ever been. That increased fluidity from 2 is still intact, making every combo feel cohesive and intentional. I'm sure most of y'all watching are already familiar with how Bayonetta combat's structured, but I'll quickly break it down for any newcomers. Bayonetta games function around the light and heavy attack system, where the X button is dedicated to punches and A to kicks. The player can string these attacks together in any manner they so please, giving this freedom to perform any combination they want without having to pick from a list. And yeah, there is a list, but I never felt pressured to use it. Since so much of the battles are centered around feel, every combo would be ingrained via muscle memory rather than memorizing a series of buttons. This made me that much more immersed as I took upon this role as Bayonetta, since I felt like I had total control over every movement given what seemed like an infinite amount of combo routes. The ingenuity behind the core gameplay allows for newcomers to start having a good time right away while still presenting a high skill ceiling for those who just can't get enough. And you know I gotta mention Witch Time, which is I don't know, the greatest game mechanic ever conceived. By simply giving you a few moments to take advantage of after performing a successful dodge, Platinum makes the combat dynamic like 10 times more interesting. There is nothing quite as satisfying as dodging a lightning quick attack from an enemy and then being rewarded with a chance to turn the tables. And while this combat loop has aged remarkably well, we're just scratching the surface. Like I mentioned before, Bayonetta 3 shows far more innovation than we've ever seen from this IP, and that starts with the weapons. I remember when I first heard they were removing the ability to equip different weapons to different appendages, I was worried. Because what other game lets you rollerblade on chainsaws while studying the blade? Or vice versa. But the new weapons introduced here more than make up for that exclusion, as they prove to be some of the most creative and fleshed out stuff Platinum has ever given us the privilege of using. Compared to the first two games where you had your usual swords, whips, and various projectile launchers, in Bayonetta 3, you've got a yo-yo with moves all named after yo-yo tricks, this mic stand with the finisher of a whistle note, Splatoon apparently, and Thomas the Tank Engine. There's about a dozen of these for you to collect, all with enough depth to last a full playthrough on their own. Now each of these weapons are paired with their very own demon, and in the previous games, these guys only appeared at the end of boss fights for the climax. Bayonetta 3 thankfully made their role far more prominent. I remember seeing these giant kaiju clashes in the first trailer thinking, oh, that's gonna be a fun set piece. Nah, this is just the gameplay. Bayonetta 3 introduces the brilliant mechanic by the name of Demon Slaves. Being limited only to your magic meter, you can seamlessly switch between controlling Bayonetta and the demon of your choice, and it's a total blast. They even let you integrate the demons in regular combos by summoning them on the very last hit, giving you even more opportunities to be in control of the battle. Their more prevalent inclusion here does wonders for the combat dynamic. Frequently switching between different flows of battle keeps the player engaged as you multitask and adapt to different situations accordingly. I remember thinking Umbran Climax from 2 was a good addition, but man, the demons spit right in its face. So having said all that, I had a fantastic time playing as Cereza in 13 of the 20 chapters. The other 7, Platinum graciously shifts the spotlight to the 2 other Umbran witches, one of them being newcomer Viola. My stance toward Viola's gameplay has remained largely the same ever since I saw the previews. mixed. Her inclusion definitely feels more like an experiment than anything else. She's got one weapon, one demon, and one painfully annoying gimmick. Rather than triggering Witch Time via a dodge, Viola triggers it by parrying. And I know this might not seem like a big deal, I thought the same thing, but it's a rough change for a number of reasons. When you've hardwired your brain to react to these split-second attacks with the right trigger, reteaching yourself to do so with the bumper is not a good time. Not to mention that the parrying window seems to be way less forgiving than that of Ceresa's dodge. Whenever I got hit as Bayonetta, it felt deserved, but I cannot tell you how many times I swore I landed a parry as Viola, only for it not to be registered. It doesn't help that half the enemy attacks just don't feel naturally parryable either. Dodging felt applicable to every scenario, but can someone tell me how I'm supposed to parry fire, or a sneak attack from under my feet, or literally anything that isn't directly in front of me? But let's say all these complaints are just because I'm bad, which I am, then Viola's gameplay should be fine if you just get good, right? Well, sorta. Since Witch Time with Bayonetta was mapped to a movement option, repositioning myself felt convenient and encouraged. But Viola plays inherently more stationary, and this might just be a preference thing, but I like having that freedom of being wherever I want on the battlefield, whenever I want, and I can't help but feel that Viola restricts that. Even her general combos feel sorta strange and not nearly as satisfying or intuitive as the blade weapons we had in the first two games. But hey, who cares when you get to listen to Ghost all fight long? Dude, play this at my wedding! The last of the characters we have to cover is a bit of a different case. Jeanne. Jeanne's spy missions were shown off at the very end of the final trailer for this game, and I thought, quirky. And how naive I was. I want you guys to imagine eating an entire box of saltine crackers without water. Congrats, you've just experienced these missions. I feel like I'm not allowed to get too frustrated with them because they really aren't that long, but oh my gosh did they feel like it. They try to hype them up with this flashy intro, and then you realize it's the most mind-numbing stealth gameplay with these annoying as hell elevators, incredibly restricted combat, and terrible boss fights. And it's not like I don't enjoy side-scrollers. Dude, I love the Shantae series to bits. I just don't like bad side-scrollers. And I know there are only 4 of these levels and I'm probably getting way too worked up about it, but every second of these missions I was just longing to go back to the hack and slash gameplay. I understand they wanted to give Jeanne more of a presence in the game after 2 gave her the short end of the stick, but this was not the way to do it. And oh my gosh, the story just shafts her anyway, but we'll get to that rant later. Let's end this segment of the video on a more positive note, with a portion of gameplay that actually was engaging, the set pieces. After seeing the initial preview of the Gamora Tokyo chase prior to the game's release, I was only expecting Platinum to sprinkle these in here and there, but holy cow dude, they're found left, right, and center. It's wild. Like any set piece, they're predictably shallow in terms of actual gameplay, but it's the spectacle that counts. Like, I dare you to find an Uncharted fan that plays these games for the mechanics. You can't, and that's fine. I mean, everyone loves these games. There's nothing quite as thrilling as a well-crafted set piece that blurs that line between gameplay and cinema. With Bayonetta being such an over-the-top ridiculous franchise, making these a priority was a no-brainer. I cannot name another Switch game out there that has set pieces of this magnitude and ambition. You can tell with every pixel on screen that the devs had an absolute blast putting these together, and that becomes especially apparent with the sheer quantity of them, sometimes being placed back to back. Like, you'll be doing this heart-pounding balls to the walls train bit, and then 2 seconds later you're blowing bubbles as Queen Butterfly? What? And okay, there are some stinkers here and there, like this Gamora Rochambeau fight, which is so slow. Oh my gosh, dude. And I guess they were just so proud of it that they put it in twice? Why? But for every one of those, there's another action-packed, memorable way to finish off a chapter on a high note. Like, dude, don't even get me started on the singing bit. Highlight of the game, man! And okay, I know what you're thinking. Yeah, this is all flashy and nice to look at, but what's beneath that shiny exterior? Where's the substance? No? You weren't thinking that? Well, good job anyway. In fact, you're right on time for a transition into the... We are as one. This magic keeps us so strong. To be honest, the narrative aspect of the Bayonetta games were never really what I played them for. Especially during my initial playthroughs of these games, the storytelling was just way too cryptic for me to get properly invested. It was always the style and gameplay that kept me hooked. But now that I've actually spent time digesting the lore, I can appreciate what's here. Don't get me wrong, Platinum is still incapable of competent storytelling without the help of Square, but once you get past that convoluted barricade, there's quite a beautiful tale across these 2 games. Now the question is, how does Bayonetta 3 follow that up? Well, the funny thing is, it doesn't. This game's plot is so barely connected to the first two games, it's baffling. You could probably pick this up as your first Bayonetta game and understand the story all the same. I mean, I kind of figured this would be a different Cereza given her new design evidently being reminiscent of her younger self, but I thought they would at least mention the Lumen Sages or Eyes of the World or Loki, but nah, it's all about the multiverse now. This game was super upfront about its premise, even during its advertising season. There are multiverse shenanigans going on and loads of different Bayonettas because of that, which I can get behind, man. Call it overdone, but I was stoked to see some intriguing character interactions between the numerous Cerezas as they attempted to mend the stability of the universe or whatever. But no. I kid you not, these different Bayonettas show up for like 3 minutes each, help you out in a boss fight or something, and then get killed off. Like, I'm pretty sure some of these variants she doesn't even exchange a word with. She's too busy nonchalantly ripping out her heart. I mean, you go, girl. Speaking of which, we should probably talk about our Bayonetta. Or I guess not ours, because I believe this is the kid from the first game, but the timeline's a mess, so honestly, who knows? If you take a peek at Bayonetta Twitter for even a second, the main complaint you'll see is that this game ruined its characters. These people are of course referring to the very contentious ending, but I believe the red flags start appearing way before that. This is the first game of the series to not have a focus on Cereza's past. You know, the thing that made her feel human? The very aspect of her character that let the player sympathize with this seemingly invincible and infinitely confident witch? So removing such an integral part of her character results in Bayonetta feeling noticeably more shallow and frankly not that much more than a one-liner dispenser. And maybe this is me, but I didn't even think the one-liners were that great this time around. Sure, they're all in character, but none I felt were nearly as memorable as those found in 1 and 2.
I feel like a fucking celebrity in this town.
Cereza's quotes from the first two games are forever etched into my brain, but I can only quote one line of hers in 3, and I just played this game. Granted, it is a banger line, but we'll get to it later as it's a late game thing. Jeanne is a similar case. The only game in which she had depth was the first, but even in 2, she served as the catalyst for the journey. Here, she is literally just screwing around with her spy stuff. That's it. She's tasked with finding Dr. Sigurd to help with their multiverse drama, while Bayonetta and Viola track down the 5 Chaos Gears, and I should probably explain Viola's deal. Viola just kind of shows up out of the blue in the prologue and says,
Bayonetta! Jeanne! You both have to help!
Viola claims that she's from another world in which they've already met, but that world is gone now. Given the opening, we know that to be true. We also know that she had what seemed to be a close relationship with the Bayonetta of her world, given her distraught reaction to witnessing her demise firsthand. So after claiming that if they don't do something, reality will be wiped out, Bayo and Jeanne just say, yeah, sure, why not? Viola's established as this Umbran witch in training, and honestly, it's really endearing. We see her fail time and time again, but her perseverance keeps carrying her forward. Viola had me rooting for her through every endeavor, and proved to be an infinitely more intriguing character than Bayonetta in this game. Her unapologetically rebellious nature felt like a natural spin on that of Cereza's confidence, and served as a nice addition to the cast. Not to mention that they absolutely crushed it with her and Bayonetta's interactions, like, oh my gosh. Cereza's portrayed as more or less a mentor figure, albeit a very condescending one, and seeing Viola get worked up over a petty nickname was always funny.
Maybe a bit too heavy for your little paws, kitty. Oh, don't make me say it again! My name is Viola! V-I-O-L fucking A! Viola!
A big issue with Viola, however, is that her arc never gets fully resolved. There's never that gratifying moment in which we can feel the culmination of every bit of growth she's had over the course of the journey, and that's especially disappointing when you realize what the purpose of her character was all along. There's a lot of mystique surrounding Viola's identity throughout the campaign, specifically what her relationship with Bayonetta and, well, Luca is. As I played, I noticed the game kept implying harder and harder that they were her parents, but I was like, nah, they're just some red herrings, right? Bayonetta would never have kids, and with Luca of all people? Give me a break. I was in denial. This is one of the two things that every Bayonetta fan is absolutely livid about. I had to mentally disconnect this game from the rest of the series to even begin to analyze what they attempted to do here, because my gosh, it goes against the entire franchise. Fans have every right to be angry when Jeanne, Cereza's very obvious soulmate for the first two games, who has fought tooth and nail to save her multiple times and has had that care reciprocated, is nonchalantly killed off by the most garbage twist villain in the world and replaced by the bumbling fool Bayonetta did nothing but make fun of in the first game. So much of this game seems to want to retcon the first two, it's absurd. I've tried looking at this in a vacuum, completely separated from what its predecessors established, but even that doesn't work. Before the end reveal, do you want to guess how many times Bayonetta and Luca interact? You know, he's supposed to be her soulmate, so we're thinking in the dozens probably. 2 times! And it's hard to even call them conversations when it's just Luca monologuing and Cereza says maybe one word.
Do you believe in fate?
Luca?
Fate brought us here together, and it will never tear us apart.
That's it! That's the whole interaction. Okay, to give credit where credit is due, some of the best scenes in the game are when Luca's in his werewolf form, because he does that now. There's this ongoing attempt throughout the campaign in which Bayonetta and Viola try and bring him back to the light, and they can hit pretty hard. That banger line I mentioned earlier takes place after Luca's demons refer to Bayonetta as Cerecita, the nickname only he ever called her, and she responds with,
You have no fucking right to call me by that name.
Dude! The sad thing is though, that line has even more potential that just isn't achieved because they didn't care to establish a believable relationship and instead prioritize shock value, which isn't even how you write a good plot twist in the first place. The lack of care to properly set up this dynamic is to the story and ending's detriment, because it is the most staggering thing in the world for the player to see two characters who barely exchange words throughout the entire narrative suddenly claim that their eternal love will keep them bonded even when death forces them to part ways. Wait, death? Yeah, believe it or not, that's the second thing everyone's ticked off about. So okay, this ending sequence actually starts off pretty strong. It essentially mirrors the opening shot for shot, except it's now our Cereza in the predicament. We go through that boss fight we got just a glimpse of before, and because we've seen the outcome, the stakes are through the roof. Like dude, when I saw Bayonetta get knocked down and then have to limp forward all over again, I was terrified. Then seeing Viola show up just in time to witness her being crucified again, oh man, it's brilliant. This scene conveys that despair so darn well, and you genuinely feel hopeless. That is until...
You didn't cry while I was gone, did you?
Dude, they did not! If I'm being honest, this was the only thing I wanted out of this story, and man, they delivered. I know it doesn't make any sense, but you'd think I hadn't eaten in days given just how quickly I ate this up. They even let you play as the OG Bayo, and they bring back the old UI, and then you play as all three of them at once? Dude, are you seeing this? It is so unreal and awesome and powerful, and they just can't hack it. Yeah, they still lose. Ignore the fact that these women have single-handedly taken down gods, but hey, whatever. After one last mega move that apparently does nothing, the other Bayonettas disappear, and Luca shows up for a little family reunion. Now having control of his werewolf form, you fight to the death alongside him, just barely defeating Singularity. Having pushed herself to her limit, Cereza is no longer able to tame the demon, resulting in her soul being knocked from her body as she lies helpless on the ground. The act of them reaching for each other's hands is pretty powerful and genuinely tear-jerking, but I doubt I'm alone with the feeling that Luca being painted as a savior here is just wrong. It's not like it's just this timeline that's cursed either, because they heavily implied that these characters all follow the same destiny in every universe. I mean, Viola's living proof of that. I know it's a generic trope, but I don't think I'm crazy for not liking the notion that these characters don't have free will and everything that's ever happened to them was just the result of fate. What kind of message is that? They took this fearless character who didn't hesitate to pave her own path and turned her into the submissive girl, accepting of even the worst of outcomes. It is so perplexing to me how they missed the mark on Bayonetta as a character so hard that she genuinely feels like a completely different person. I don't even think her being in a relationship with Luca is inherently flawed. Sure, it doesn't make sense, but given that they seem to want to branch away from the first two games, they could have made it work. As long as they didn't assassinate her character and actually did this crazy thing called showing the two conversing. If the writers were just upfront about their little family from the get-go, moments like these would have resonated exponentially more, giving us a more rich and competent story rather than just some cheap twists. If they actually got us invested in this relationship, can you imagine how much more emotional them going down together would be? Can you imagine how much more Viola breaking down on the pavement would mean? There's this gorgeous scene right after with Cereza having her final dance to a vocal track by the name of We Are As One, and it's of course all about their unbreakable bond formed by faith and cherished memories. It's an undeniably beautiful sequence, but they have not earned it. You can't just whip out this integral character dynamic at the last second, pretend the whole plot was about it, and then try to cash in on emotional points. It's like they're trying to gaslight the player into thinking the narrative wasn't written by a fourth grader, but they're not fooling anyone. What's even worse is they don't even seem to have the courtesy to send her off respectfully. After the credits roll, we have the scene in which Viola now carries the label of Bayonetta. Look, I like Viola. I like her a lot. I said she's a welcome addition, not a welcome replacement. It genuinely feels like such a slap in the face to fans by substituting this beloved character, handing her name off like it's nothing. Ending her saga on such an abysmal note is one thing, but having the audacity to continue it with a surrogate protagonist is a whole nother can of worms. I want to reiterate that I genuinely really do like Viola, but the direction they seem to be taking this series really rubs me the wrong way, and I know I'm not alone in that. Especially considering that Kamiya's apparently planned up to Bayonetta 9? Well, TLDW, the narrative is a flaming dumpster fire. But hey, at least there's a tonally insensitive dance sequence! Bayonetta 3 is a tricky game to rank amongst its predecessors. On one hand, the soundtrack and art style are god tier, but then the shoddy graphics really take a hit to the visual department. You've got what I think to be the best gameplay in the series when you're playing as Cereza, and then the riveting watching paint dry with John. The story, while having good moments, doesn't achieve much beyond that, as it completely misunderstands its characters, alienating its entire audience in the process. To clear things up, I actually quite enjoyed Bayonetta 3. I know we're ending on a super sour note, but this game genuinely might be my favorite release this year. I'm such a sucker for Bayonetta gameplay, and it most definitely delivered in that regard. Yeah, it's got plenty of flaws, but I'm looking forward to spending more time with it, diving deeper into the combat system and getting creative with all the combo options. As for the question of the video, is it the best of the trilogy? I mean, you kidding, man? This is the first game where she has an idle animation. Jeff Keighley, get over here, man! Jokes aside, I do think 2 still remains my favorite, but there are so many things 3 does right that I wouldn't be surprised if it makes a comeback for me in the years to come. As of now though, it's just got some low lows that unfortunately balance out the high highs. At the end of the day, I still highly recommend this game. I don't regret playing it in the slightest, and can't wait to jump back in. Sure, the story drives me crazy, but hey, games let you skip cutscenes for a reason. This video is supposed to be like 15 minutes long, but apparently I had a lot more to say, so I hope you enjoyed it regardless. If you did, I implore you to check me out on Twitter at JohnPokeSpyro, as that's where I post updates for upcoming videos and whatnot. Link in description, yada yada yada, you get it, I'm a YouTuber. Either way, thanks so much for sticking around to the end, and to everyone else who watched even a fraction of this video. Sometimes I feel like a madman as I spend more and more time in this Google Doc, so everyone being here really does make the madness feel worth it. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day.